So, any
Tech
hot
news.
non-tech news to jump through?
The
Maybe the drill,
Senate
military
passed
drill.
the Inflation Reduction Act. That's pretty significant. It's going to have a ton of money for a lot of things and let them negotiate drug prices. That's huge for Medicare.
I guess there was a shelling of a Ukrainian nuclear plant.
Is it
Oh,
verified?
it's not verified, in my opinion, but I haven't checked the news. But I know the shelling of the bridges that happened,
The
Russian
the,
bridges.
the head of the UN just condemned it. So I imagine he would know more than anyone claiming that it's not verified.
Of course, I haven't read the news, so.
I think the
Yeah, they
bigger
were
one
trying to
about this is
decide.
the Amnesty International report about how Ukraine actually put their military base near near the population, right? The residents.
Okay, I don't
Then
see any.
naturally becomes a target.
I don't see any particularly huge news. Here's the one you were talking about: Senate passes Democrat sweeping healthcare and climate bill.
Tyler, did you cover that bombing in Gaza?
No, we just. Oh, here it is. Israel Islamic Jihad truce holds in Gaza after dozens killed. Well, that's good news. The first half of it, anyways.
Well,
Um,
have you been tracking the? We've had a series of unusual flooding here in the U.S. from Death Valley
Oh, Death Valley.
to West Virginia to Arizona, places that typically haven't had it, have been like pretty bad. And actually, in West Virginia, we had a number of people who died. West Virginia and Kentucky, so mostly Kentucky.
Flooding in Arizona, that's pretty interesting.
okay, there we go. So the tech news today, the top stories from Mark Gurman over there at Bloomberg. As usual, he says he's got sources that many Apple Store employees. Oh no, not this game again. Oh no, Mark, Mark, you knucklehead, Mark. We played this game a few times already with Mark Gurman over there at Bloomberg with his sources of 5 Apple Store employees. And he makes some grand proclamation about the future of Apple based on the 5 janitors at 5 different Apple stores. Or where's the
They were
security?
senior.
The
They were
security
senior
guard.
janitors.
Senior. Yeah,
They
okay.
were senior.
Fair enough. Fair enough,
Okay,
Matt.
just
I
want to be
stand
honest.
corrected. These are very seasoned veteran custodial art representatives of
Check
the
your
Apple
sources.
website.
That's all I'm saying.
We just, with all due respect,
Yeah.
these are full-fledged custodians. I apologize. And just if you've not heard this rant before, let me just summarize very briefly by saying I can get 5. There's over 120,000 Apple employees. I can get 5 Apple Store employees to say that Hitler was Jesus, and vice versa. Either way, in a day. As a matter of fact, I might not even have to go to more than one Apple Store to do that. Maybe 2. I certainly won't have to leave.
Actually, it's not even going to take you a day. It could take you probably about 10 minutes.
So, Mark and his sources at the Apple Store, he's done this before. And you just have to look at the bigger context and the clickbait mill operation that they're running over there. So anyway, let me go ahead and read. I haven't even read the story. This could be a totally legitimate point they're making. I have no idea because I haven't read it yet. So anyways, it says many Apple Store employees, although that doesn't sound good when they start like that. Many Apple Store employees continue to discuss unionizing. Oh, well, I wonder who's. Not that you have any bone to pick with Apple or anything here. Mark, do you think Apple's going to forget that you're writing this kind of, you're drumming up You, in fact, are doing more to promote the unionization of the Apple employees than the Apple Store employees themselves by writing this story. That really you're the one drumming up the unionization of the Apple employees. And why might that be, Mark? Apple has started to record its September event, which is when they launch the iPhone. It's only a month away, second Tuesday in September. And they'll launch the new iPhone 14 and whatever else they feel like launching, the AirPod Pro, and I've lost all hope of them announcing anything to do with AR or VR at this point, or a car, or a TV. Um, Sources from Mark Gurman say many Apple Store employees continue to discuss unionizing. How much time do they need to discuss that exactly? Like a week, a month? It's been a few quarters now. It's been about a year now. I think we can move beyond the discussion stage if we're actually sincere about doing this, guys. Let's just go ahead and do it. Starbucks has done it. Toys R Us, KFC. Who knows? There's been a whole lot of union. An Amazon warehouse has done it. We could go ahead and start the procedures now. We can stop discussing. We're well past the discussion phase of the unionization efforts. Or
Tom,
I'm going to call a bluff and say you're a bunch of talky talk millennials who don't know how to get shit done, and maybe that's
Tyler,
why they find themselves in the situation that they find themselves in. Go ahead, David.
I have a perfect example of the epicenter of some of the stupidity. Here in Austin, they've had a pizza joint that it's not even the one that's on South Congress. It's not like the most well known, but they expanded and they franchise. They're a franchise or whatever. They're called Via 313, and 313 is the area code for, I believe, Detroit, because it's Detroit style pizza. So they're taking a riff in Austin instead of being Chicago style. What can we do? We'll just put more sauce on it. That's apparently Detroit style. One of the Via 313s is trying to unionize, and it's just they're covering it in the same Mark Gurman-esque way here with the they think it's a good expression of this baby boomer echo of unionization, which makes no sense. If you want a franchise to be able to survive in the restaurant industry, what are you going to be, the one restaurant here that's going to, you can change the policies, but if you want to go work at a place that's a fixed wage, they have a couple, they're vegan, and they're already probably a line out the door to work there.
Okay, well, I'm getting the hunch this is going to be a slow news Monday if that's the top story of today. So moving on, second story is a look at potential Ethereum forks led by some miners after the shift to proof of stake model called the merge, expected as early as September. Number 3, from Reuters, SoftBank reports a $17 billion loss for the Vision Fund in Q1 as the value of the tech portfolio fell, including SenseTime, that's the Clearview AI of China, by the way, and Uber. And I'm just realizing I don't know that I knew that SoftBank was an investor in SenseTime. But that's kind of interesting that they are. Wall Street Journal did a profile of Celsius CEO Alex Mashinsky as the company goes bankrupt. Sources say he is a brash entrepreneur with a history of unhappy investors and colleagues. Next up, Mark Gurman from Bloomberg has a second article. That's a first. According to filings, Apple spent $33 million in 2021 and $169 million in 2022 to date. So far in 2022, and it's only a bit over half over. Okay, so that's a tremendous increase, a 5x increase on acquisition payments, down from 1.5 billion in 2020 as its deal making slows dramatically. Well, yeah, Mark, did you not read the headlines from a year ago where all of the new acquisitions are getting scrutinized to the nth degree? Even ones that shouldn't be scrutinized are starting to be scrutinized, like the Facebook's purchase of Giphy, for God's sake, the little GIF engine. How ridiculous was that?
And it's also how it's measured in dollars, right? So if it down rounds, or inevitably you can go, things are on sale, you can even buy more companies for less money. So, you know, it's how it's reported on the number side too.
CNBC says Netflix's games, because they have more than just video content, they got into the games because they had trouble buying more non-game content, video content, because they're competing with so many goddamn. That's a very crowded space now. So they started diversifying into games, and according to the numbers here, they have 23.3 million total downloads of games, an average of 1.7 million daily active users of these games. Less than 1% of the subscribers are playing the games. Netflix plans to, well, maybe it's because there's the word flicks is in the name, Netflix. You know what comes next? There's going to be a bad board meeting, and they're going to figure out they need to rebrand as Gameflix. Yes, I smell something like that coming. They got to somehow let people know that they've got games. Anyway, Netflix plans to reach 50 games by the end of the year. Next up, sources say India plans to ban Chinese smartphone makers from selling devices for under $150, impacting Xiaomi and others seeking to boost its domestic industries. Say what? India?
What the hell?
What? What? What in the world is going on over there in India? They want to
And why
promote.
the stipulation on anything under 150?
They want to promote their own domestic stuff over the Chinese stuff. But I thought they loved the Chinese. Saudamini, don't, you're Indian. I thought maybe I must have misread something. But this just seems wild. How wild is this? India is preferring its own Indian build in India. Say Saudamini, they don't have like a big national mantra like build in India or something like that, do they?
Well, we are promoting two really big businessmen, and they are into the 5G space. 5G is getting launched soon. The bids are on, and Geo is
Yeah, this
the
wouldn't
local
have
Indian
nothing.
brand.
This would have nothing to do with the Giro phone being run by Mukesh Ambani, now would it?
Um, Little birdie told me something.
The little birdie told you. Okay, well, let's unpack it for the slow kids, like our friend
Geo
Liz.
is supposed to be the cheapest service available and very affordable in the rural areas. Probably that's the competition they're trying to kill.
Right. So, for those who don't know, India doesn't mess around. India really doesn't care much for China, and they don't. Why compete with China when you don't have to? When you can ban them. If you can't beat them, ban them. And that's what they did. They're banning the cheap Chinese phones, and they're going to replace them with cheap Indian phones, notably the Giro phone, notably with a big stake from Mukesh Ambani, who kind of calls shots over there to some degree. So that's what's going on. And don't be surprised, because you're going to see India doing versions and variations of that in every which way. They nearly did it with Twitter when Twitter wasn't following Modi's demands. They started building up their own domestic version, and they will do the same with Facebook and every other big app over there if they feel the need to. Make no mistake about that. They would
Yeah,
love.
so so
Like
Tyler, I'm
the
curious
Tata.
the way they've implemented this is through a price floor, right? So does that mean they will remove that once the Indian manufacturers can manufacture below that price? Because otherwise, you're just it's higher prices for the Indian consumer for a while, right? Until that happens.
Next, I don't have a good answer for that. But I can't guess why they're thinking coming up with that $150 mark point without
Well,
reading.
Tyler, I just, was thinking about Tata and how they kind of replace the local cars and providing that cheaper models for the people of India who can afford it now. And same way in the phones, the price point perhaps is going to serve their population, the number of population which cannot afford expensive models either. And that number is pretty high. So kind of a repetition of what Tata and other car companies did.
Yeah.
There are other Indian brands like Lava, Micromax, amongst others, that the government plans to push. That's why they're restricting the Chinese phones also, including because Chinese really got the price point down, and they have been charged for alleged tax evasion already, and so I guess it's all flowing in the story.
Okay, moving right along. Google files 2 lawsuits against Sonos. Oh, that's rich. Alleging it infringed on several patents related to smart speakers and voice control as part of a long-running dispute. After Sonos won in court, and the reason I said it's rich is because Sonos successfully sued Google for infringing on Sonos's intellectual property and patents, and now Google's suing Sonos for similar things, and that's why it's you got to admire the brass on Google here. Alleging that Sonos infringed on several of Google's patents related to smart speakers and voice control. That's hilarious because Sonos predates anything that Google ever did in smart speakers by a decade.
Exactly. I'm thinking it should be otherwise. I think Sonos had this technology way
Of course
ahead
they
of
did.
Google, and perhaps Google copied them.
Of
And this is Google's attempt of.
That is what happened, and Google lost a lawsuit over it, and now Google's thinking, "Oh, okay, you want a patent war? Okay, we've got some patents that you're going to be in violation of, and now we're going to retaliate." Of course, they wouldn't have done that if Sonos hadn't felt the need to hold Google's feet to the fire. Anyway, after Sonos won in court earlier this year, Google is striking back at Sonos with a pair of lawsuits alleging that Sonos is infringing on some Google patents. So. Next up, Vista Equity Partners plans to acquire Seattle-based automated tax compliance maker. Who cares? Next, NVIDIA reports Q2 preliminary earnings. Get ready, Nancy Pelosi. Showing 6.7 billion revenue, down 19% from Q1 and below its 8.1 significantly below its 8.1 billion guidance, driven by
And
last
that's why
year.
her husband's already sold the stock, by the way. So
Okay.
so they're not in it anymore. Yeah.
Okay. Well, rumors were part of the reason she went over to.
Well, that may not be her only chip investment. I'm just saying they dumped Nvidia.
Mhm.
Nvidia. Yeah.
NVIDIA shares
How's that legal? How's that really legal?
because America.
Pelosi has financial motivations like much of Congress.
Well, Congress gets to pass the laws that regulate themselves, so they're not very hard on themselves.
And when people go and say, well, it might have been different back in my day, it's actually really strange looking at history of Congress and the president, etc. I'm really struggling to find times in history when it hasn't been corrupt. So if anyone has any, like, particularly Halcon, like just like this Alcillian or whatever, the golden days that they could reference, I'm looking for this as an active history research thing. Please message me.
1787 was probably the best time.
Oh, got the British for you. Sorry, we'll
Are
talk about
you
that later.
are you linking her trip with Nvidia's results?
Reuters says Qualcomm and GlobalFoundries signed a multi-billion-dollar revenue agreement to double long-term production, including expanding GlobalFoundries' New York plant. And IEEE Spectrum has an article about a deep dive into the data that Tesla collects from its 3 million vehicles, GPS trails, and gateway log files using the data to develop autopilot. And who owns the data? Well, of course, Tesla does, well, unless your jurisdiction dictates otherwise. Palantir reports Q2 revenue rose 26% year over year. That's
Hey,
not bad.
surveillance.
Yeah, that's not bad at all for a company that size. And customers rose 250% year over year. Lyft forms Lyft Media, helping consolidate and expand its ad offerings. Wall Street Journal is reporting that as Congress prepares for its August recess, the bipartisan antitrust bill targeting U.S. tech giants remains in limbo, and it will continue to remain in limbo.
America is becoming one of the few developed countries that has not passed significant tech regulation or any data policies or any industry policies, although the recent one, CHIPS Act, does count. it's getting the thing is that CHIPS Act is being heralded as this mighty, forward-thinking future stuff. It's like this is maintenance. This is basic running a government at this point. Uh, we're patting ourselves on the back for things that are just should be basic competence at this point, which is kind of sad.
A Tyler Palantir's stock is actually initially
Down.
was down 12% on that news because whatever those numbers were, they were below expectations.
They want even more surveillance.
They gave weak Q3 guidance was maybe the main thrust of the downward momentum today. And after the draft ruling reversing Roe versus Wade, location data company Tapestry says two companies asked to buy device data revealing users who visited abortion clinics.
Oh God, there's only two of them. I mean, that would be actually that would be a surprise. It's like, well, what about the 2,000 other databases that have that as incidentary data? Anonymization doesn't exist, so practically every database that has location data has this de facto.
China's Baidu, which is like their Google of sorts, secures permits for something called Apollo Go, a fully driverless commercial robotaxi service operating mainly in zones with revamped roads. Very
I'm
clear.
telling you guys, just put better signage. It's the cheap way to do automation.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. You get that's the inevitable compromise just on the cost basis. Like at some point, all the autonomous car makers are going to beg to give money to governments to make their roads very autopilot friendly.
You're talking literally like spray paint and signage that's done up by state slave labor in the prisons. Like there's the same people that make the signs over the highways, the same people that make the license plates. It's like this is the cheapest thing you can possibly do. Instead, they've been throwing fortunes into like doing let's do lidar, extreme microwave like radar interfaces with AI interfaces. And that's great for a VC pitch deck, but if you actually want to build it, I mean, you're talking about something that's a 10,000 to 1 price difference. So I mean, they're gonna do the chip of the spring up and the side option essentially. That's gonna be one they double down on.
Illinois-based Cybele Health, which offers wearable sensors, AI-enabled data analytics, and cloud software for remote patient monitoring, raises $33 million. And the London-based Sarah, whose app uses data analytics and AI to manage at-home health care, has raised $320 million. Warner Brothers Discovery announced plans to launch a combined HBO Max and Discovery Plus streaming service. Online crypto casinos are luring gamers into gambling, sometimes to the point of bankruptcy, with celebrity endorsements
Wait, gambling leads to bankruptcy? This is never happened before.
and MIT Tech Review. And this is the last of the big articles today. At least four top executives associated with a Chinese state-owned semiconductor fund, which has invested $30 billion to date, have been arrested on corruption charges. Okay, there they are. Them are your big, boring tech headlines today. Who has a tweet?
I sent you like 3 tweets this morning from the South China Morning Post. One of them you already covered, which was the Baidu thing. I
Okay.
sent you one about Samsung opening a semiconductor plant in Vietnam, and I'm trying to remember what the third one was. I'll look it up.
I
Uh,
put a link in the chat for semiwiki.com. If anyone's like wanting to really dive in deep in the technical side of semiconductors, it's one of the better jumping off points for people that work in the industry. Semiwiki.com. It has a really interesting commentary on some of the current events going on.
Oh yeah, Tyler. I don't know if you cut because I wasn't here at the start of the hour, but the Chinese are apparently, and that was the other one I tweeted out. The Chinese are supposedly developing or they're working on a flying submarine that they're going to supposedly use for both civilian and military purposes.
How big is that thing?
Uh, uh, how big is it? I don't
Yeah, we're
know.
talking like tiny little like drone shaped stuff.
Go
We're
look.
talking.
So I tweeted it over to Tech News, and you can look at my Twitter accounts, which is KIFCIP for the article. So I don't have it right in front of me. All right, the one I have is, and I don't know if we've discussed yet. Have you discussed SoftBank's loss? of
Yeah,
23 billion, and it's larger than last quarter.
Oh, wow.
23 billion
And
this
they
quarter.
dumped all their Uber.
Yeah, it's 23 billion this quarter, but that's a larger loss than the quarter they had, or the previous quarter. And then their net asset decline is, I think it went from like 24 billion down to 18.5 or something like that.
Their
But
exposure
anyway,
is
but you
so
know
large
what?
to
They're
all
getting
this.
hit, but also Berkshire Hathaway is getting hit, so a lot of people are getting these adjustments.
Okay, I just retweeted your tweet about that, Robert. Saudamini found one that Apple reportedly working on 4 smart new home devices, including a high-end HomePod. And speaking of that, next month, almost exactly a month from tomorrow, Apple will have its big annual event where they give the iPhone update, which will be iPhone 14 and a whole bunch of other stuff. And here's an article right now. I'll pin it to the top. I can't believe they're doing this to me. They're doing it to me again. I can't believe they're doing this again. Saudamini found it. I just pinned it. I just retweeted it. It's from Times of
AR, VR glasses coming back.
Apple could announce AR headset in January
It's
2023.
it's gonna happen this time. The 40 other
It
times the
shall.
headline. This
Not
time it's
We
for
list
believe
real.
four.
it.
Not list four.
This time it's for real.
Uh-uh.
Not like the other times. It's like
But
it's there's the boy that cried wolf. We should replace
did we
that with
lose
the
him or something? Is there like a machine gun that?
right. It's so there's the boy that cried wolf, and then this is the tech journalist that basically cries apple glasses. You know, it's the same. It's basically the same thing.
The tech journalist that cried Apple Glass.
I
Real.
love that. You heard it here first.
I thought it
Okay,
was me.
so
Hey Tyler,
Saudi,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to mention probably a better story that was covered by your friend Mr. Gurman is something that I posted that came out on the 4th, so earlier this month, but it was talking about just a few days ago, but it was just talking about ATT, meaning Apple's tracking technology, and just the short, medium, and long impacts that it's going to have on the overarching business. And it's just a very long term view of what they can do and what their future revenues are going to look like. So it's more of a long read, but I think topic number 13, 14, and 15 are pretty important. So I did post that on Twitter up to the Tech News handle.
Okay, so jumping through to the next one here, Volkswagen to buy autonomous driving tech worth 4 billion from Israel. A laser-based lidar sensors for its advanced driver assistance. And what else? A lot of people.
Tyler,
Yes.
there was also interesting in Vanity Fair. I mean,
Yeah.
only related to tech because he's got so much money in tech that apparently Peter Thiel wants to inject himself with young people's blood. That's literally an article in Vanity Fair, and I tweeted that out the other day to you.
It's a perennial bit of joy.
Uh,
Where's Alex Jones when you need him to comment on that story?
Yeah, I know it's going to be sad. They had this is a Silicon Valley episode called the Blood Boy episode. It was actually a lot of fun.
I guess it's the plasma.
Tyler, did you hear about Alex Jones, something like that? That he got arrested or something? Was it? Did he got arrested or fined something crazy? That also was news that just came out of.
Yeah,
Very
well, he
big.
lost a law. He lost a defamation. He lost a lawsuit, for like whatever defamation or something.
Yeah.
For to the parents of some of the parents of the Sandy Hook shooting. Yeah, because he kept claiming it was a hoax.
Yeah, I
The
think
real thing
there
was his
was.
lawyer gave his entire phone's text message history to the other guy, so that's going to be their parts. We're keeping all of our external memory essentially in easily transferable devices, so that's fun.
Okay. And Saudamini found one that China seeks urgent meeting with Sri Lanka after its request to delay. China's embassy here has sought an urgent meeting with senior Sri Lankan authorities after Colombo, meaning the capital of Sri Lanka, sought a deferment of the planned docking. Oh, I guess they're going to
They'd like a military base. They'd really like a military base slash civilian cargo place that just so happens to be a military base. Can we please have a military base here?
China's embassy has in Sri Lanka has sought an urgent meeting with senior authorities after Colombo sought a deferment of the planned docking of high-tech Chinese research vessels, quote unquote. By the way, India, at the time that this whole deal was going down about a port, China building this port in Sri Lanka, India made Sri Lanka insist that one of the deal points be that it could never be used for Chinese military purposes.
Research totally different.
Research now, these are research vessels now.
To be fair, Five Eyes does the same thing. We have research ships that are science ships that are covered with sensors that are basically spy ships. But
Yeah,
totally different.
SPY, spy, yes. The short word for research.
I wonder,
China's a lot more brazen about it, though. At least we give fig leaves.
the Chinese embassy in Colombo sought an urgent meeting with Sri Lankan authorities to discuss the issue, and I would love to know if the Chinese officials were bringing a briefcase, a very large duffel bag, to that meeting.
Also, how are we hearing about this meeting?
Indian intelligence, no doubt.
Nothing is beyond our reach satellite, right? The one with the octopus that's kind of got the whole world.
It's got the whole world in
They could
his hand.
if China could just get those outgoing, guys who are broke, to just attend a quick little meeting at Starbucks and sign a quick little document on their way out.
The idea of signing over military bases over a Starbucks thing, like some Silicon Valley tech investment, it's very amusing. But I can totally see that happening.
Sir, I brought the special duffel bag you requested. So, can you imagine though, as the country is melting, it's like, could somebody please just sign this document? Anybody, any one of you people who are about to run out the door as the dumpster fire explodes, could somebody please just sign this document, please?
I mean, half of getting things done in the world is just knowing where to file the paperwork.
Any Starbucks will do. Top scientists admit space telescope image was actually a slice of chorizo. That one was quite viral over the weekend.
James Webb could have saved so much money.
Yeah, I
Still,
thought it was kind of cheesy, not necessarily a good move, given that the climate right now is, hey, I don't want these microchips inside me through this vaccine, and then you go out and do this, which kind of tarnishes public trust in scientists. Even though it was a joke, and physicists are known for pranks, sometimes I'm reminded that academics kind of live in a bubble of their own.
so
We had the tobacco white coats back before the climate change version, back for the other parts. It's like there's always been academics that are available for sale, so it's not that the majority of them doing that. Far from it, but you only need a very small portion to be either pliant or have a little bit not public perception lined up quite right to be an issue, and that's been a thing for a while.
here I just found the flying unmanned submarine that Ken was talking about. The propeller.
Yeah, it's a $300 drone that can sink a $10 billion aircraft carrier. It's just you only need like a little 30 kilogram, 300 kilogram little ship charge on that thing. Yeah, that totally work.
Propeller driven. It
Excellent
looks
drone.
it looks like a commercial drone, like
It
a
is.
and propeller driven, which means, and the reason for that is so that it could go a lot further. It looks like a little
It,
airplane, yeah. Including inspecting underwater mines, and
yep.
can very handy piece of hardware.
Imagine just what you could do with a fleet of 100 of these things. I mean, what nice carrier group you got there.
10,000.
Yeah,
Samsung.
Drop them out of a aircraft carrier, just do, 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 and then you just have this huge swarm, almost like bees themselves. But you still need like something like an F-35 as a platform for commanding the battlefield, as it were.
yeah. An easier one is just to plant them in front of, in say, a common strait off of your territorial waters, and then just have them, just surface at a certain endpoint, and then just your fleet doesn't exist anymore. Just plant them in
There's
the
a
ocean
movie
ahead of
about
time.
that, right? There was a movie about the president and all these drones came out flying and stuff, and just the idea of having a small charge, but it being so nimble and so
Yes,
amazing
slaughter
at moving
bots.
around.
Slaughter bots
Yeah.
from Elon Musk stuff. That was when the United States of America was trying to say, well, we have a technology advantage for right now, and we're tired of and we're spending tens of billions of dollars on these vanity projects that we call carrier groups and battleships and all sorts of other fun, fancy modern day versions. And those military platforms pay for a lot of congressional pork. I mean, trillions essentially collectively. And the thing is that if you're actually trying to fight a war against some people that aren't just turbans in a desert and people that actually have an actual military, turns out that you don't actually need most of that. You could just do cheap little stuff, and then they can basically like Maginot Line style. You can take out most of the stuff. So $300 to take out a $10 billion carrier. Yeah, which one do you want to basically invest your future on? I mean, China honestly having essentially a different kind of military strategy. They have an advantage in that they don't have our existing military stuff. They can actually choose more. So, it's not necessarily mean technologically superior line, just one that just ignores our tech tree, and that's something that you see. This is just like a little cheap little consumer version you're seeing, like this little version you see in the news right here. Just imagine it's the paper rock scissors version. Imagine that for each one of our military technologies. You don't have to make the better. You don't have to make them more superior. Just choose the one that ends up being its foil. And yeah, it's crazy.
Okay. Phil found one that VR is as good as psychedelics at helping people reach transcendence. One
Hot
key
dog.
I
on
wouldn't go so far.
a VR experience elicited a response indistinguishable from subjects who took medium doses of LSD or magic mushrooms. And what I want to know is why not both?
Only you.
There's
That
this thing called
Overdose.
puking.
Supply chain.
Say it
I,
again, Cheryl, because I
if
don't
the,
think they heard.
Overdose.
why not design special VR experiences for people on magic mushrooms or LSD? That
Have you played some of the VR music games? Like,
Tyler.
it's pretty trippy.
yeah.
Tyler, that was really interesting. You just brought that up because when I was at MetAms, the metaverse event in Amsterdam a few months ago, there was a really, really fascinating company startup that was funded by someone that I know that's Dutch, that's living in LA, and it actually is a pod, a virtual augmented reality. Like you go, it was I de-virginized my Oculus use, but I wasn't as crazy wild as Cheryl. It was inside this booth, and it's called Sensix. The company's called Sensix, and what you do is you put the Oculus glasses on, and then you sit in this cube, this little pod, and it gives you all of the sensations. Like, so you have the Oculus on, but then you have feeling. You have like some warmth in there, like infrared, and then you also have some scents, like aromatherapy. Like, honestly, I was not a believer because I'm a yoga teacher and I've been doing yoga therapy for 30 years, but I literally sat in that booth with the Oculus on, with actually the particular track that they suggested, and I came out of there and I was like, holy crap, that actually worked. Like, it was really crazy because it's like you literally had the sensory of the scents from the aromatherapy, you had the infrared warmth on your back, and then you had this Oculus with this track of music and imagery. Like, it's almost to the point Tyler was hysterical because I was so in a zone. I kind of like leaned against the pod, and it startled me because the Oculus hit the side. I'm sorry, I just had to laugh for myself because I was like, what was that? So I startled myself, but I came out and I was like, wow, that's impressive. The company's called Sensix, and they're out of Den Bosch. And there's some really amazing companies that are working on some really brilliant AR VR stuff here in Netherlands, specifically augmented reality, blended reality, mixed reality. Like, they really are kind of taking that forward. There's another new company that I kind of made a bet with the CEO that they might actually get funded when they went to NFT NYC, and a lot of people love the company. It's called Replicum, REP. I'll get you the name of it. I'll post it in the back channel. But it's creating absolutely so real avatars. like so real, like scary real, like Tyler meeting him in Sweden real. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm like, that's crazy. And they're working on like you could choose what gender or what ethnicity you want. It's crazy and it looks so real.
So
And
the
it's
I
point,
just
want
Tyler,
the
to see
back to
this
point,
your
thing.
point.
Go ahead.
the point
Tyler,
is
back.
psychological and cognitive changes that this ER whatever experience
yeah,
is kind of alluding to, which is insane because that means that just by the vision and certain whatever shapes and forms and colors and music they're using, they're able to put the brain in a theta state, which is like a sleep-like state right before sleep, where
relaxed, yeah.
yeah, you're relaxed. And the immersive experience I had with the Van Gogh, where you meditate in that immersive
Yeah.
experience with deep breathing, can also cause same kind of effect. But to your point, Tyler, combining the hallucinogens with this experience, I don't know if the brain can handle that much yet.
Let's find out.
Actually, I
Yeah, let's
think it would
find
be
out.
great to. I think it would be great to compare. I think what your point was, Tyler, is why not formulate this so that it targets the person who's having the experience rather than making the experience like a shroom trip or like an LSD trip.
Yeah,
I do agree with you. If you combine the two, then you're talking a heightened therapeutic experience for the person. And I like that idea most.
yeah, I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
to that you necessarily want to do something that would be unpleasant. I'm suggesting it would be decide clearly the people who are very familiar with the experience would need to be deeply involved in the development of it. To
Tyler?
yes,
Well, but then again, let's go back to the whole essence of like the whole LSD and the trips, trip sitting. I mean, we talked about this a few months ago, and a bunch of people on the stage were quite interested in it. And I talked to a few folks offline about this, which is really just like facilitating a trip. And Sharon's kind of dovetailing into exactly what I was getting at in terms of what I experienced because I'm not someone that's partaken in it, but many of the Dutch are very, I mean, they're pretty, the microdosing capital of the world, in my opinion, is Amsterdam. But when you combine this with the right amounts and the right trip sitter, facilitator, you can actually, as everyone was saying, you could create some breakthroughs around PTSD, CPTSD, GAD. You could really make some interesting strides. But again, it goes back to how is it facilitated? Who are the trip sitters? Where is the environment created that's safe, as Iram was stating as well? It's important to recognize that I think that I think this trip therapy I think is going to be something that once the U.S. sort of moves forward in approving this sort of mushroom therapy, whatever you want to call it, or once they make it less decriminalized, I think you'll see a huge resurgence of these pop-up sort of facilities that will start to do that. I mean, you're already seeing it with Ivy Drip, Next Health in LA and New York, where you could go in and get a cocktail of certain vitamins and nutrients to kind of contribute to your wellness. I think that the future of wellness is going to include these microdosing elements so that people could start to feel those healing elements without the sort of long the fear of the impact of it, because there's a Netflix right now that's Mind Your Mind. um, Tyler, there's a how your mind thinks or how your mind functions, and it talks about LSD and microdosing and tripping and all of the history behind it. So I would be very keen to see how the industry of psychedelics is going to bring this forward into the modern day and utilizing VR, AR, where it's in a healthy manner, in a constructive manner, as Sharon and Iram were also aligning with.
Well,
Well,
Aaron
one
Rodgers.
thing, sorry, just one brief comment about the IV therapies. There is no study that says it works because the body get rid of access anyway. So just wanted to, I'm not aligning, not highlighting, not aligning with anything with LSD or psychedelics, in my opinion, because none of the studies, medical studies, have this kind of consensus yet. There are contradictory results, but the major consensus is not out yet because there are side effects as well.
But actually, Iram, there is a report from 1955, Germany. I would probably I'll look. I'll see if I find you the doctor's name. But there was reports, and that actually was buried very, very deeply in like the land
And
of
the
like
military
paperwork.
also, I mean, don't
Exactly.
forget to
Was that
mention
Sharon?
there's
Yeah.
over 20
Exactly.
years of military report because
100%.
we did the research first on LSD in
Correct.
covert ways and then brought out the report thereafter. And they're available for all to research into.
Correct. Exactly. And also remote viewing has also been something, Sharon, as well. This has all been
Come on.
has all been in there and studied. I mean, you can find the paperwork. It's not hard to find if you do good research. You'll find it.
We got to move on.
The only point I was going to make is it came out over the weekend about Aaron Rodgers. For those of you who don't know, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, and that the utilization of lightweight psychedelics helped his career. I thought that was fairly interesting and rather odd.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
On the
it's brain rewiring where, it's very difficult to do without some assistance. It can definitely have great impacts. I've seen people come out of deep depression, suicidal ideations at the end of their treatments. So, who am I to say?
Well, it was actually journalists that most recently paved the way for decriminalization of psychedelic therapies, specifically for PTSD, for journalists who did work overseas. So they would cover a war. Hey, I'm running to a phone booth. I turn around because my ear's kind of wet. Wait, hold on a second. There was a person running behind me. Oh shit, they just splattered into a pool of blood. They're not there anymore. And that fucks people up. And I believe the individual actually testified, I think in the U.S. To move like for example MDMA and these other drugs into these more clinical settings. So and personally having had those experiences of PTSD in childhood and then gone through that kind of therapy with like a psychiatrist who focus on military folks with PTSD, I can say it can change your life. It can change the way you look at your life. It's yeah. Can't say more good things about it, but you got to do it carefully.
so on the topic of military though, for anybody younger listening who might want to become a military pilot in the future, certainly in the UK, one of the first questions they ask you, have you ever taken LSD, completely precludes you from a career as a pilot for the rest of your life. And they say they can test for it, whether they can or not, don't know, but just be aware. You touch
Yeah.
that shit once, then you're never going to be a military pilot. Certainly not in the UK, possibly not anywhere in the world. As you shouldn't be, because of the possibility of a flashback at any point in the rest of
And
your life,
same
is what I'm
same
told.
for the field of medicine.
okay, moving right along. Tina found an interesting one from Adweek that Heinz ketchup taps Dolly 2 to make a Heinz ketchup ad. The brand is one of the first to rely on OpenAI's Dolly 2 art generator to make a Heinz ketchup ad, and I have to say it's pretty brilliant. I just retweeted Tina's tweet to the Tech News Twitter.
Marketers have a new competitor in the field now.
But right now, like if you see those English descriptions, actually it's not legit English. Like deliberately crippled old language. So if you use it, you still need the skill of image editing. It's not a full ready product for you. I mean, they deliberately sabotage those functions. So, like if you don't know image editing, that's not a final image for you.
Well, that's good to know.
Okay. Next up, Seoul, Korea weighs a chip for alliance as ties with China hang in a balance. South Korea is poised to join a working level meeting of government officials involving major chip making nations along with the United States, Taiwan, Korea, and who's the fourth? The chip for
Japan,
alliance. Probably,
Japan.
yes, probably Japan. Yes, it is Japan.
Yes, it's Japan. U.S., Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. Yeah, that's the
Yep,
target. But
that's
South
the four.
Korea, yeah, is a bit reluctant to join. That's why the President Yoon is that yeah, he tried to avoid the Pelosi directly.
Uh-huh.
Smart guy. I was worried about him after Moon Jae-in, but he's actually taking a cautionary step whenever Western politics come into play, and I agree with that because of their closeness to China. Isolating China is not a good idea for South Korea at all.
Hmm.
Yeah, and especially I think this chip alliance, one of the controversial aspects is, well, if they do join the alliance, then that may restrict what they're able to sell to the Chinese market. So I think it's a little
Or
complicated.
receive, yeah,
Yeah.
it's bottlenecking both channels.
Yeah, it's like they can't extend their investment above I forgot how many nanometers procedure in China. So that means yeah, it's a hard decision because it's not advanced chip with, procedure. It's the what they already have already manufactured in China.
Speaking of which, Cal found an article that Apple has already started making the iPhone 14 in India.
Completely moving things out of China
Not
then.
not completely, but not slowly.
I hope they have an iPhone 14 mini. I've really enjoyed the smaller size compared to the other large phone that I have. Not sure what y'all think about the iPhone sizes or whatnot.
On
But right now, SE is the smallest one, so it's like the iPhone. It's the smallest one. If you like that, Eric, you can choose SE.
on the topic of China, the Jack Dorsey tweeted ban the CCP over the weekend.
He isn't traveling anytime soon, is he? No, I'm just
Yeah, better not to travel to Hong Kong as well.
kidding.
Good
Exactly.
luck with any flights that may get rerouted. It's like, oh, right this way, sir.
I found the one from Ken. Samsung, who was just named as Korea. Korea is planning to join the Chip 4. It's kind of like a major chip alliance. It's amazing that chips are that important that you have geopolitical alliances now forming on the issue. And by the way, there was an expert in the article about Chip 4 who said there's no question Korea is going to join. It's just a question of what price China's going to inflict on them for doing so. South Ken found in South China Morning Post, as he said, Samsung to invest 3.3 billion manufacture new chip parts in Vietnam, and that when we talk about Korea and chips, we're almost exclusively talking about Samsung, or at least disproportionately. Samsung is number two in the world, and a huge percentage of what Korea contributes to the chips comes via Samsung. Um, and the idea that they're now manufacturing in Vietnam, the reason I mentioned that is because it fits very well with Cal's finding that Apple's starting to produce iPhone 14s in India. And what you're by the way, I listened to a really interesting uh, podcast today about global supply chains and the point that China today is no longer the cheapest place to produce anything, even with the fact that companies sunk billions and tens of billions in factory costs to get set up in China. Even with that, they're still not the cheapest place to produce anything today. You could still go start from scratch and build it in much more cost effective areas, and that's a really huge problem for China.
Yeah,
So
I think Africa is the new China, right? So I think most
I think
most
even India actually, because of the labor force, the level of they have a lot of people who have.
anywho, next up, Jeff G found one from the New York Times that says if you think 9% inflation is bad, try 90%. With the world grappling with rising prices, a tour through Argentina reveals that years of inflation can give rise to a truly bizarre economy. And indeed, their currency is so screwy that they had multiple versions of their own currency and exchange rates going on. There was the black market rate and the bank rate, and it was always fun vacationing in Argentina with the different exchange rates going on. Um, anyway, that's the articles that I have for today. Because as I mentioned, I have a short one, but we did do a good hour, and we'll do it again tomorrow. So do be on the lookout for some fantastic tweets and headlines, and we'll share them all again here tomorrow.
Tyler,
Thank you, everybody.
Ben, you want
yeah,
to
I
just
hear
set
you
the room
off.
up?
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm going to kick off mine early in that case. I think, Cheryl, a
Okay.
little bit early.